Hello and welcome back to this lesson, which is trigger volumes and overlap events. In this lesson we are going to be working with box triggers. We're going to learn how we can use overlap events inside of blueprints, and we're also going to take a look at how we can parent our trigger box to our maze. And then we're going to wrap up this video by seeing how we can mark actors to generate overlap events. So let's take a look at how we could generate an event in Blueprints for when our ball escapes the exit hole of our maze. And we'll be able to use this event as a simple win condition for our level. So how can we get started with this? Well, we can come over to the Modes panel, and on the Modes panel where we have the basic section, we can scroll all the way down here and we can find a box trigger. And when we hover over this, it says a box-shaped trigger used to generate overlap events in the level. So this is perfect. This is just what we need. We can click and drag this into our level. Let me just move it up so we can take a quick look at this. So we've just got a simple outline of a box, and on the details panel, we can see the units that make up the shape of the box. And just like the BSP brush, we can click and drag this to resize it. But we can also use the scale tool in the viewport to reshape this, and it's going to update these values at the same time. Okay, so there's two different ways that we can shape this trigger box. Now let's just go to the translate tool and let's move this over to near where our exit hole is, and let's take a look at how we want to shape this and place it. So if we were to place and shape the trigger box where it sits inside the escape hole and where its bounds extend above it, then we have a problem for when the ball tries to escape, because the ball might be moving fast enough that it has a chance to jump over the corners and other areas of the escape hole, causing it to travel in and out of our trigger box. So this is going to cause our overlap events to fire while the ball is still inside the maze. So this isn't really going to work for us because we want the events to fire when we know the ball has escaped the maze, so we need a better placement for this. And the solution for this is simply to place and shape the trigger box underneath the escape hole of the maze. So a challenge for you right now is to add a trigger box to your level, and I want you to place and reshape it underneath your maze escape hole. So pause the video here, have a go at placing and shaping your trigger box, and then come back to the lesson. Okay, so here is my trigger box placed and shaped underneath the escape hole of my maze. So this is looking good, and by default when we play the game we can't see the trigger box, and this is because trigger boxes are hidden in the game by default. Okay, so if we hit stop and if we select the trigger box, we can override it from being hidden by scrolling down on the details panel to where we have the rendering section, and look, we have a checkbox telling us that the actor is hidden in the game. If we uncheck this and hit play, we can now see our trigger box. Okay, but remember, we are dynamically changing the transform of our maze during gameplay, but we are not updating the position of the trigger box. Okay, so how can we fix this? Well, it's really easy to do. We can select the trigger box and we can attach it to the maze by coming to the world outliner, and we can drag and drop the trigger box onto our maze static mesh, and we can see here it says attach trigger box to maze 1. So when we do this, the trigger box becomes a child of the maze. The maze is the parent to the trigger box now. So if we hit play and if we move our maze, we can see that the trigger box is moving with the maze. Okay, so now we're ready to add some code with this trigger box. So let's head over to our level blueprint, and if we right click in the graph, oh, it's telling me to select actors to see available events and functions. So basically this means I haven't got an actor selected in my viewport. So we want to make sure we've got the trigger box selected, and now in the level blueprint when we right click, we can see that we can create a reference to the trigger box, and just above we can call functions and also add events. And we want an event for our trigger box. So let's double click here, and look, we have different types of events, but we want a collision event. So let's double click on collision, and look, we have begin overlap and end overlap events. So begin overlap is when an actor enters the trigger box, and end overlap is when an actor exits the trigger box. Well, we want an event for when our ball escapes the maze, so the end overlap is the event we want to use here. So looking at this event, we have our friendly execution pin, And we also have this overlapped actor return value. This is returning a reference to who was overlapped, and in this case, it would return a reference to our trigger box. And we also have this other actor return value. This is returning a reference to the actor who made the overlap. In our case, it would be the ball. So we now have our overlap event, and we need to make sure this event is properly firing when our ball escapes the maze. So an easy way to do this is just to drag out our execution pin, and we can just use a print string, and let's just print a simple message to the screen, something like ball has escaped. Okay, now let's come back to the editor where we have our level. Let's just see what happens when we hit play. So if I just play through my level, we can see that when we get to the end of the level, when our ball escapes, we don't get a print string. So our overlap event didn't execute, and there's a final step to all of this. We need to make our ball generate overlap events. We can do this just by selecting it, and on the details panel we can scroll down to the collision section. Let's just expand this little area here, and look, we have this generate overlap events, and it's unchecked, so this is why our event didn't fire. So if we check it and play the game again, let's just see what happens. When we get to the end of the level, we now see our print string. So when working with triggers and overlap events, we need to make sure we mark actors to generate overlap events. Okay, so in the next lesson, we're going to take a look at how we can time how long it takes us to escape our maze. So when you're ready, I'll see you in the next lesson. Hey, welcome back to this lesson, which is returning game time in seconds. In this lesson, we're going to learn how we can find out how long it takes for the player to escape the maze. We are then going to print a winning message to the screen. And with this message, we are going to combine a message and the time it took to escape the maze. Then we're going to wrap up this lesson by making use of the delay function and restarting the level after we have completed it. So let's take a look at how we can time how long it takes for our ball to escape the maze. So we have this end overlap event here that fires when our ball escapes, and we print a simple message to the screen with this print string. Let me just select both of these nodes and let's just move them down a bit. Okay, so how can we get our print string to display the time it takes for the player to make the ball escape? Well, we can use some time functions to achieve this. If we right click and scroll down to the utility section, when we double click here, we can find a time category. If we double click here, we can see a bunch of different functions that are linked to time. And one of these is a function named get game time in seconds. Okay, so this sounds good for us. Let's grab this. So this returns a float value, and it's going to be in seconds, and it tells us how much time has passed since we've hit play. So if we were to connect this to the print string, we can see that it does a float to string conversion for us. Okay, so when our ball now escapes and executes the end overlap on our trigger box, it should print the amount of time it took for the ball to escape. So let's come back to the level and try this out. Before we hit play, remember you can always move the ball to the end of your maze for testing, so you don't have to play through the whole of your game to see this end result. But I have the ability to fast forward the video here, so I'm just going to leave the ball where it is and I'm going to play and fast forward. So our ball escapes from the maze and it prints how long it's taken. Great, but we can see that the value here is pretty long. It has a fractional value of 6 digits. We can see it as 0.502593. So this is very precise. We can probably just cut this down to about 2 fractional values. So let's head back to the level blueprint and let's see how we can do this. So there's different ways we could approach this, but I'm just going to show you one easy solution that we could use here. Let's remove our float to string conversion, and if we drag out and release our float return value, we can come down to utilities and then the text category, and let's convert this from a float to text by calling the toText function. Let's just move our print string along further, and then with the return value of the toText, we can plug this straight into the string input on the print string. Okay, so why am I doing this? We are converting a float to text and then to a string. That doesn't really seem like it would help. But look, on the toText conversion function, we can hit this little white arrow and expand it, and there's a bunch of inputs here we can use. If we look at the input at the bottom, we have a maximum fractional value we can adjust. Let's just go ahead and change this value to 2. We don't even need to do anything else. We can just collapse the function and make it smaller by hitting the white arrow again. And now let's come back to our level and hit play. I'm just going to fast forward through the gameplay again. And now when we reach the end, the seconds are displayed, but they are now cut down to 2 fractional values. Okay, great. So let's come back to the level blueprint and let's take a look at how we can build a winning message. So for building a winning message, let's look at an example. Let's imagine that it will take us 22.53 seconds to complete our maze. So we would want a winning message to say something like, "Well done, you escaped the maze in 22.53 seconds. Well, we would have to chop up our message into sections. The first section would be, "Well done, you escaped the maze in." And then for the second section, we would have to plug in the game time in seconds result. And we would have to finish off the message with a final section. So this is actually pretty easy to do in Blueprints, and the solution for us is to use the append string function. So to use the append string function, I'm going to break the link on the input for the string. I'm just going to select and move my get game time in seconds functions just out of the way, so we've got some more space in between the print string. And now let's drag out from the input of the print string, and let's come down to utilities, and then string, and look, the first function here is append. And the append function gives us an A input for the string and also a B input for the string. So we can combine 2 messages now. But look, we can also add string inputs by using this add pin, and there's no limit on how many of these we can add. So in the A input, we can type in, "Well done, you escaped the maze in," and then we can hit spacebar to add a space there, and then we can plug our get game time in seconds result into the B input, and then we could use another space on the C input, and we can type in seconds with an exclamation mark. So let's come back to the level and let's hit play and see what happens. When we get to the end and when the ball escapes, we can now see we have the full message printed on our screen. Okay, so it works. We can set up a custom message by combining values and strings together in Blueprints. Okay, so right now your challenge is to build your own winning message the player will receive when they make the ball escape. Be creative and combine the time it took for the ball to escape the maze by appending the game time in seconds into the string. Remember to change the length of time that the string is on the screen for. And remember to change the color of the string. So pause the video here, have fun creating your message, and when you're done, come back to the lesson and hit resume. Okay, so I've already built my winning message, and I hope you've had a go and created your own fun winning message as well. And remember, we can change the properties of the string that gets printed onto our screen by expanding the white arrow on the print string function, and here we can change the text color and the duration that the string is on the screen for. So while we're here, let's do one final thing to wrap up this lesson. Let's make it so when we receive our winning message, we delay the game by 5 seconds and we can restart the level to try and beat our score. So to do this, we can drag out the output pin of the print string. We can type and search for our delay function. We want to delay it by 5 seconds, so we can change the duration to 5. And then from the completed output, we can drag out this pin and we want to restart the level. Okay, so to restart the level, we can come down to the game category. And when we expand this, there's a bunch of game specific functions. And look, there's a function named open level. Okay, and it just asks for the level name. Well, we can see the level name up in the top left of the editor. We can see that we are in level 1, and remember we can see the level in the bottom right corner of the viewport. So the level name is just level 1 for me. So let's just zoom out here. So when we receive our overlap event from the trigger box, we print the winning message and we delay by 5 seconds, and then we restart the level. So let's compile, let's hit save to save the level, and let's jump in the game and hit play. So we can use our mouse input to rotate the maze, and this causes the ball to move around because it's simulating physics. And because of this, we can try to guide it to the end of the maze and let it escape. And once it escapes, we receive a winning message that tells us how long it took for the ball to escape the maze. Then after 5 seconds, the level will restart, so we can try and beat our previous time. Okay, great, so this is really good progress, and our game is pretty much there. In the next lesson, we're going to take a look at fixing a few issues that might pop up when we play the game. So when you're ready, let's just jump straight into the next lesson.